Hello and welcome to What is the Craic Irish Bit of Bodybuilding Podcast. Nearly messed up the intro already, but with Neil Rennie coaching. So it's been a wee while since I've done this, but we're back for a new season. And really, the goal of this podcast is to promote Irish bodybuilding, athletes, coaches, educators, and kind of put Irish bodybuilding on the map again. Today, I've got special guest James Melville, and I'm going to run through some of James's highlights, I suppose. He's a lifetime natural. Correct me if I'm wrong here, two-time BNBF British Champion, PCA British Champion, WNBF Ireland overall champion, owner of the Compound Room in Lisburn as well, and he's an online coach. And I believe you got your PCA pro card. Was it this year as well?
I got it in 2022 at the British Finals.
2022. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you coming on, James. You're a coach that I've looked up to in terms of like I suppose your education as well. I think coming from a real grounding of science, which I always appreciate as well, mate. But as I say, thank you for coming on.
absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to getting stuck in today. So yeah,
Quite a few
let's go.
questions as well. I think like having your perspective as well as a natural bodybuilder and not just natural bodybuilder, obviously a highly competitive one. You know, it's a very different insight potentially to some of the guests we have on before, and I think it's quite refreshing too. To be honest, I think in a society where it's a large part of the sport, seeing somebody do so well and not going down that route, it's a nice perspective. So, James, like,
Yep.
how did you get started in bodybuilding? Kind of what were your ambitions at the start?
This is a wee bit interesting. It kind of ties in just with the intro, the way you brought me in there. So thank you first and foremost for that. And yeah, 2013, I'd talked about competing. I worked for an Irish supplement company. I'll not get into name dropping or anything, but so it was kind of around the sport. And I was working at capacity, like at the trade stands and whatever else. And it was like just a small, natural. I was still training as a bodybuilder, even though I wasn't competing as a bodybuilder. At the same time, I was running marathons. I was long distance cyclist. I was racing as well. So most of the sports I was into during that phase was endurance sports, and it also coincided with most of the clients I work with were. So the reason why I got into that, I always kind of like being almost like a method actor. I'm like a method coach. Whenever I was coaching runners, I was put myself through the programming, both the strength phases, the nutritional elements, and trying to get myself as not somebody that was built like a runner to be able to perform quite well. Same with the endurance cycling. I got laughed at quite often at the starting lineups because I had a little bit more muscle, not a lot, but a little bit more than most of the other guys that were on my shoulders. And it was literally just that no quit made me kind of pretty good at it. It wasn't the talent; it was just being stubborn. It made me, pretty successful at that. But at the same time, I was lifting weights like a bodybuilder. I did a little bit of strength and conditioning. I try and explain to people that everything resistance based is strength and conditioning of some description. And because I think in the bodybuilding realm, we get told that what we do isn't functional.
Yeah.
And we can get into that a wee bit later on. But where I believe that anything resistance based is completely functional because if it's geared toward, if the intent is aligning with, your end product. So if building bigger biceps, then a bicep curl is a functional exercise. So I was going to the shows. The guy that I was working for, I'd got it into my head. I'm going to compete in bodybuilding. So this was in 2013, and I played about with it. I thought, right, I'm not getting any younger. I was 33 years of age at the time, and so that was back in 2013. I sent my photos through to the guy I was working with, and he knew I was natural. I was looking to compete in the UK BFF because at that point I didn't even know there was natural federations because they weren't being promoted across in Northern Ireland. So UK BFF was one of the shows that I would go to, and they introduced classic physique, I think they called it at the time. And UK BFF were one of the larger UK federations at that point before it kind of flipped and split. And because they had the classic bodybuilder, they went, okay, even though I'm natural, I'm not going to get too outsized, hopefully. I could probably go in there and compete. Sent my photos through to this guy, and he had said, he'd advised me no. He says, you're too small, you'll essentially get smoked, and pretty much laughed off the stage.
Right.
And I decided to, yeah, it was pretty confidence wracking in that moment.
That's
But
a good start, isn't
I
it?
uh, I decided I was like, look, I'm going to go and do it anyway. And I kept it to myself. Even people I work with, nobody knew, bar maybe three people knew I was prepping for the show. And actually, that the owner of that supplement company was had a trade stand at that show the following year that I was entered into, and he had asked me a few weeks before, would you work the trade stand? And I says, no, I'm actually competing. And I didn't get a lot of support, put it that way. But
Yeah.
went on that stage, and I think there was about 14 in the category. never had a panic attack in my life. This is a true story. It was backstage. You had Stuart Lang, Stephen Phillips, Ricardo. A lot of these were well-known bodybuilders that were substantially larger than I was, and they were in my category, and had a pure panic attack backstage, and just somehow found myself onto the stage. And I mean, I was halfway through that show, and I would love to know who it is. So if anybody ends up listening to this who said these words, number 46, if you haven't won, I've lost a tenner. So this is halfway through the show, and I looked down, and my badge number was 46. And this was a voice I didn't know. So it was like, it's not somebody like a friend going, I think you're going to win. And that lifted my confidence, because before then I was like, I just want to get on and off the stage. This is a one and done. And I ended up winning that show.
Right.
There was like 14. So I'd won the Northern Ireland Classic Bodybuilding in 2014. Went to the British finals that year and placed top 3, which was highly unexpected. And that was pretty much it. The love just knocked on from there. And for the next 8 years, I competed every single season.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a big under. What weight were you then, James, on your first show when you'd won and took third?
First show, I was around 60. So my weight limit for my height at the time, so it was height in centimeters minus 100, something like that, I think it was. So I was, my height was at 168 centimeters, so I had to be 68 kilos. So I was 68 on the button the morning of the show.
Right.
That kind of ties into last year, like 11 years later. This is natural bodybuilding, and my weight low was 64.9. So after 11 years, I was like 5 or 6 pounds lighter.
I mean, that's so interesting. And I think that's what I was going to say, because I remember you saying to me at the seminar that you were like 64 kilos or something this year. So
Yeah.
it just sort of shows that like lifespan of a natural bodybuilder in terms of like, I think expectations and reality of it as well. And it's
Absolutely.
It's interesting to hear like from your perspective on that, is like, you know, when you were seeing these guys, obviously that were probably, well, they might be 20, 30 kilos, some of them more muscle, if I remember them rightly.
Yep.
Like, how did that play into your mind about natural? And then potentially, did you think ever about going, right, I want to go down the assisted route once you fell in love with the sport itself?
See, I'd always be, and this is something that I said last year, one of the things that I'm against is natural bodybuilders being on their high horses, and sort of, for me, it's all the same sport. Like whenever I'm on a PCA stage, I don't want to be, oh, that's that natural bodybuilder. I just want to be a bodybuilder on that stage and be judged, because that's the judge's job. The lineup that they have, and they look at all the variables, condition. I'm never going to win in size, so I know I have to play into my strengths, and you know, which is hopefully going to be condition, proportion, things like that. And it's done me in good stead. The thing that people think with natural bodybuilders is they've got this David versus Goliath mindset. It's like, oh, I want to take down Goliath. I'm just a bodybuilding fan, so I want to compete on stages regardless whether it's natural or untested, and just throw my hat in the ring and just do battle with who I believe are the best people. And if I have a good experience with that federation, that makes me want to be there with them. And PCA were exactly a prime example of that.
Yeah, I mean, even as you say, it's you playing into your strengths for that, because obviously, like, your presentation is a massive part of it. Your ability to pose, and like probably some of the best conditioning in the PCA last year, to be frank with it. Like, but even, you know, on stage, especially when you had your pro debut with them, like, was that a nerve-wracking experience? You know, going into like this then level above?
No, this is actually, because I've done pretty good in the natural bodybuilding federations. Whenever I go on stage, regardless of where it is, a lot of people, I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people have the expectation that I have to win. And there's a pressure with that. Well, a pressure that I don't mind is, I think Chris Bumstead said, pressure is a privilege or something like that. And it is, but it's a lot. It can be a lot. You're in the lead up the show. And then I prep myself for the shows as well. So I'm my own coach and I'm my own athlete. And, you know, you have this sort of antagonistic conflict going inside your brain. No, stick to the plan. Oh, I need more food, whatever it is. And I'm generally pretty good at that. But then whenever you have the added pressure that I can't just go to a natural show and enjoy the experience, I'm like, if I don't win, then it's like, well, there's going to be loads of people who are happy that I don't win. And equally, there's going to be a lot of people that are happy if I win. You know, it's kind of like that. And that does bring a wee bit of pressure. The PCA, I have zero pressure. because most people do perceive me just as a natural bodybuilder, which is fine. I'm not expected to do well on those stages. And actually in 2022, which was my first experience with PCA, I had for a couple of years said to Edel, oh, I think I'm going to jump into a PCA show, or something like that as a bit of a kind of a warm up, because there's no pressure. I'm just going to I can go on and just get a bit of stage time. And I talked about it, and I don't know if I had the conviction to follow through. The week before the PCA Welsh in 2022, I was booking clients in the following weekend. She says, you can't be booking clients in. And I said, why? She goes, because you're booked to do PCA Welsh. That was 8 days before. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, right, okay. She had booked the flights. We went across to Port Talbot, went backstage at the Welsh. There was 2 other natural bodybuilders actually in that lineup. There's like 12, I think 12 or 13 of us. And one of the other natural bodybuilders came up to me backstage and said, before we walked on, and says, congratulations. Now, I was one of the smaller guys in that stage. And that might, to most people, be like music to your ears. But in that minute, up until that point, I felt no pressure. There's no expectation. And he just gave me the pressure before I walked on stage. I think you're going to win. And in my head, winning wasn't even a consideration. It was just, I want to go on and see how I look. And I won that show. After that show, I had no intention of doing the British PCA British finals. And Edel says, you're doing it. And there was the Midlands classic bodybuilder. I seen his picture, and I'm generally not like this. I looked at his image on Instagram, and I was like, oh, look at the size of this freak. Yeah. And he's in my how's he in my category? So she books me anyway. She goes, you're doing it. So we went to the PCA British, and your guys there backstage, as well as some of these other guys, from what I could see, really good condition. I was like, I don't know if my condition's better than that.
Yeah.
And we went on stage, and it went through the pose, and I got moved into the middle. And that guy that I was worried about, then they moved me out, moved him in. And I went, okay, in my head, I went, second's not bad. Yeah. We did another round of pose, and they moved me back in, and then left me there. And in the end, it says, look, this is down to a split decision. At one point, and I went in my head of, I've lost this one anyway, but I won. They awarded me the pro card. I believe that I was the first Irish bodybuilder to become pro. I think
in 2022 was it
ever?
Yeah, that was in
2022.
Yeah, very late. I would say very late. You probably know better than me, but I don't know of any others at that time.
Well, I think so, because I think I had a discussion with Phil after he had obviously coached Ross, and Ross got his pro card last year, Phil Abram.
Yeah.
And the topic had come up. Ross was like the first, and I just went funny bit about it, because I'll come to that as well. Like, I am a massive fan of Ross, and what he's done in his physique, and I know that there's no limits to what I believe that he can achieve. I've said it from day one. I'm a big fan, but yeah, it was just a wee bit of a joke. Phil was like, coached the first PCA Irish pro, and I was just sent him a message. Like,
they won't mind that. They seem to take getting beat pretty well.
Oh, they do. 100%. 100%. Wow.
I had to say it. No, I got well. What was your biggest achievement then? Would you count that as probably your biggest achievement within? Because it was such an unexpected thing at the time, probably in your head.
Yeah, I think I'd been probably competing for about 4 or 5 years before I even thought about I could maybe turn pro as a natural.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never lost a qualifier. I've won every qualifier I've done, and so I see guys now, and they win one show, and they're like, I want to turn pro, and I get guys that I maybe helping with their posing, or even guys that I end up taking on as clients, and they're like, I want to turn pro next year, and I'm like, you've done one show, and take your time. Like, people always just want to jump to pro, and I'm kind of glad I actually missed out. I was in 2 overall battles to turn pro within the natural realms, and missed out on turning pro. And I look back now, as much as it hurt, I look back now, and I was so glad that I missed that opportunity, because my physique, looking back, was not ready.
Yeah.
And I would have climbed to that next rung of the ladder, and my first pro experience would have been a disaster, because if I was up against a decent lineup, I honestly would have been smoked. So sometimes, as they say, what's meant for you won't go by you, and like sometimes the time and the stars just align, and you got to be willing to be patient. If you love this sport, you should love it regardless of achieving the things that you set out to achieve. Part of the process of loving the sport is the unknown. We might want to win this title. We might want to eventually turn pro, but there is a possibility if you're up against good lineups that you never get the accolades that you're aiming for. And that's part of it. Don't fall out of love with it just because it doesn't provide you what your ego wants.
No, I think that's a very good sentiment. I think it is that want to rush to be there, and people that haven't even really necessarily been around bodybuilding or really getting started, they're talking about pro cards and everything else with it, but you miss out on such a big part of the enjoyment and the love of what bodybuilding's about, which is really about like improving yourself, and then hopefully you get to a level where somebody rewards you that. But it can't be only the sole aim, especially when you're only starting as well with a little bit and with very little knowledge.
Yeah.
At any point, James, like, was there ever a point where you thought maybe I'd like to go down the enhanced route? Maybe it's something I'd like to try?
Never. And I've actually spoke to a lot of natural bodybuilders about this, and I think there's generally a general consensus that most natural bodybuilders have contemplated. And I think I do think that it will maybe that'll potentially change just because it seems like natural federations are now starting to like put more prize money, and you're seeing some more natural bodybuilders making careers out of this. Which is good to see, because before I don't feel like those avenues were actually accessible. I think like social media has a lot to do with it. I think that the standard of natural bodybuilding and how it's developing is definitely opening a lot of doors. And I think so. This was something that it came to me. If you don't mind, we'll just touch on why I started lifting weights. And it's not a morbid story. It does sound like it initially, but once I peel the layer back, you'll realize that it was the best thing that happened. In 2001, I was in a bad accident in London and ended up with brain trauma. So I was essentially like pronounced dead. I somehow survived, went through brain surgery to remove blood clots. I had a stroke, I had paralysis on my left-hand side, complete no mobility, lost speech, sight was impaired, loads of stuff went on. And after eventually getting released from intensive care in King's College Hospital in London, and they were fantastic. I think that, like, looking back, if I had been somewhere else, I think the quality of that hospital probably gave me a lifeline to stay on here.
Yeah.
So after a while, I was able to build up a little bit of fine motor skills in my left side. Then I'd suffered a lot of atrophy, as you can imagine, and the occupational health and the therapist had said, look, you might want to lift a little bit, like some weights to try and rebuild that side. So that's where it started.
You took to the extreme.
To the extreme, right? So, and I think like the biggest compliment I can get now is about my symmetry being quite good, because that wasn't easy. It took me a long time to try to get as much of that balance back, partly because I wasn't connecting as well, even for 5-6 years of training on the left-hand side. So there was a lot of concepts I had to utilize that are only being brought to light now in terms of like pre-activation. Pre-activation was terminologies you wouldn't have heard 15, 20 years ago. Yeah. But I was, without coining any phrases or anything, I was having to implement those with the side that was impaired. And so my reason for eventually getting into bodybuilding was actually nothing to do with trying to be the best bodybuilder on the stage. So that's probably why it's never really came into my head that was a route that I'd be willing to take. I was just literally told that you probably get 40 to 50% if you work hard of your mobility and back. So my biggest challenge was, let's try to get 100% back. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. And even whenever I'm still developing as a bodybuilder now, I'm just like, the more that I develop, the further I go beyond what I ever thought was possible. So that's why I'd never really thought about the sort of assistant route. Plus, even if I did now, I'm at 44 years of age. I think it would be a pointless pursuit, even if I did have that idea.
I mean, it's also you've been very successful competing as a natural. Obviously, it's taken you probably longer to get to potentially the top as well. But like, I've just noted down a couple of points there when you were talking, because I thought it was interesting as well. Is like, I think, with the natural bodybuilding scene, to me, obviously, like, I mean, I've nowhere near been it as long as you, but like, I've seen it become a little bit more, it's a bit more recognized now. And I think the quality of the athletes, probably because there's a lot more knowledge. There's a lot more knowledge being shared. Like, it's really come up, and I sort of question myself as well. if I had been around an environment of more natural bodybuilding, I probably would have stayed as a natural. But obviously that ship sailed now. But at the same time, I think, and even the quality of the shows I've taken natural athletes to as well, it's crazy. Like sometimes, like the conditioning, especially, like I would nearly argue that the conditioning you see at natural shows is a lot higher generally than often what you see in the enhanced shows.
Yeah, I agree. I think we were obviously at the PCA workshop there the other week, and one of the things that I'd sort of mentioned was natural bodybuilders, in my experience, look at every single element. We look at the 1%.
Yeah.
And if somebody's 16, 17 stone with pretty good condition, they can probably pose 10% incorrectly and it won't really impact their physique.
Mm.
But natural bodybuilders not potentially being the biggest, like I said, 64 kilo, particularly this year, competing against the PCA guys. I look at every degree of rotation that I can get in my spine to get another half an inch across my shoulders and the side poses. I critique it, and I do the same with all my clients and athletes as well. I'm trying to squeeze out every 1%. And that's, it's part of that illusion. It also means that if you are competing against somebody that has, a bigger frame, you can close that gap. Like in person backstage, you're like, oh, that guy's got a big frame. But if he doesn't pose it and you do, you're going to close some of that space off. And I always said that if all the big guys click on to what we know or what we utilize, then we've no chance again. So
Yeah.
I think there's
So,
there's a lot of guys who are, I think, assisted. If they do end up getting beat by a natural bodybuilder, they might take it completely the wrong way. But with those losses, you need to sort of go, right, well, why did I lose there? Because if it's condition, you can fix that.
mhm.
If it's presentation, you can fix that. You don't need a lot of time. You just need proper guidance. So this is the point about even advanced. I see it, the same people walk on stage and pose the same way every single year. And I'm like going, if he did this as somebody that's evaluating how they're displaying their physique, I'm like, you can make him look 10% better like that, and he'll never ask for help because he's experienced or I've been on the scene for 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm still always willing to listen, and but also be very critical on, like, if I record my own posing, I'm looking at it going, I could get more rotation, or if I set my leg like this, or it's going to get just that little bit more out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a part of the sport, like especially when I first started, it was about like, oh, I'll try this. That you kind of was I massively undervalued, and then obviously like we go into the seminars and seeing people like yourself talking about it. Again, even like obviously as a enhanced guy, even I'm usually a lot smaller than a lot of the guys that I'm say against. But again, like putting so much more effort into pose and presentation last year, it made a massive difference. And I think that's something that we try to get across, even or yourself especially at the seminar, is like how those little minutiae and those details to the actual sport is like it's a sport at the end of the day, and you're having to pick all the boxes around it. It makes such a big difference, because you were at your posing routine. What did you pose to at your British finals? I'd seen it up
It's run for cover.
because that
Uh,
was excellent. Like that was really really good.
yeah, so I actually posted it back in 20, wasn't it 2018? 2018. Yeah, so my word that year was savage. It was like my father passed away at the start of the year in 2018, and this was even like a weird wee thing. So it was probably 2018 whenever I first thought this is after competing 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18. My dad was never really into the bodybuilding at all, and he would have like made wee jabs and stuff at me and stuff. We grew up in quite a like a prudish kind of family, so to see their son stand in a pair of trunks was a little bit kind of weird and tanned up and all that stuff. So my dad was like just a quiet old school country guy. It was like he didn't like it, or so I thought. And then he asked me, like it was actually 2 weeks before he passed, like, well, are you competing this year? What are you going to do? And I says, my aim's to place top two in the BNBF British finals and get to the World Championships and compete in Miami. So whenever he passed away, I had left his watch. It wasn't worth a lot, but it was something that he only wore now and again. So I had his watch, and I'd said, right, I'm changing the thing. I need to. I'm going to win the British title this year. I'd placed fourth the year before, and I just sort of adopted the word savage, and then I'd heard that song "Savage Run for Cover" and by Phantom, and the beat, bass on it was just absolutely perfect. That was like my anthem. I think a lot of bodybuilders do end up finding that,
Yeah.
something that really resonates with them. And I always said to my clients, even my posing clients, find a song that you can connect with. I literally, I felt like I was part of that because I felt like I had to survive that year with running the business and going through that. And there was other, family issues that we were trying to deal with at the same time, which was quite problematic. So I was like, I need to get through this year like a savage. And I went on that stage, and it was the first time that I got a lot of praise for the actual posing routine, because before it was kind of like robotic. You're every pose you're just turning to the right, turning to the right, turn to the right. Whereas I created a nice flow and performed it better. So then whenever we're discussing what I was going to do this year, I was like, I'm going to reuse that song.
Yeah.
What was quite nice was after I did that routine in 2018, that people messaged and says, "Do you mind if I use your song from a routine?" And I said no.
I would say the same.
I went no, and I don't think I ever heard anybody else do it or use that song. So I was like, look, I'm going to use it again, and yeah, it was pretty good.
I think it's like, as you say, see if you can, like, I find anyways, with some of my better experiences with prep as well, is like when you can resonate with the song and you can really, like, it can be the soundtrack of your prep, and you can not to get too corny, but you can really attach yourself to that and feel it every single day. It does drive you through, because nearly as soon as that song comes on, it's like this trigger to, right, like, fucking let's go with it. Like,
Yeah,
I found that with like Purple Rain. That's something I'm going to use again this year as well, and it's just something that just
cracking
means
song.
something. I need to
Yeah,
print it now to it, a bit of dynamism to it, but
yeah,
stand and turn with.
yeah, yeah. Think about it. Turn that way now and again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's loads of me I want to sort of get into with you, like, because there has been some questions, but I think it'd be something potentially another time as well to come back on. But I'd be quite interested in hearing a little bit about your off seasons and how they come into your prep, because I sort of wonder myself, with somebody that's competing around 64 kilos and still sitting around, what, 68 to 70 kilos. Like, have you pushed off seasons harder? As a natural, have you seen a result? Do you think you need as much time away between the stage?
yeah. I think it's the, it's something that you look at. I think for if you're trying to still gain muscle, if somebody is already closer to their ceiling, like you might say the same with myself. At my age and after the amount of years that I've trained, the likelihood is that I'm going to have obviously this limitation as to how much more muscle that I can add to my frame. So quite often, if those people, it's just a matter of getting better as refinement rather than more size, then those people, as long as their social life and domestic life allows them to do it, they can compete every single year. I think if somebody is still in the stage of their bodybuilding career where they're actively accruing muscle tissue and and gaining mass, then I would be saying, look, take another year out, particularly if you're a bit younger and you have the time. Me being 44, like I feel like the sand timer's been flipped and it's closer to being run through than it's not. So I'm like going, I'll take a year out more because I feel maybe with injuries in this circumstance this year, I need to take a little bit longer out just to make sure that I'm rehabbed, that I can make some progress in a few small areas that I think that I'm still slightly underdeveloped, in order to come back next year a little bit stronger as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that side. The off-season strategy for me has changed, and again, I like practicing different methods. I've been over 50 pounds heavier than stage weight one off season, which
Oh.
was not nice. And the rate of gain as well. Like, I think rate of gain has got a lot to be said of how you're. I don't think there's a lot of science on this, but I'm looking at this purely anecdotally, and I've actually witnessed it with clients as well. Whenever you have a heavy rate of gain, I think that I personally think that more fat storage is localized. People will dispute this. I think if your rate of gain, so I'll give you an example. If I gain, and I've done this before, gained a lot of weight over like maybe 4 or 5 weeks, my abs are completely gone. It's not just retention, because it's even
Yeah.
after I've maybe tidied up for 5 days. I have a lot of localized fat here, but I've still striation in my lateral quad. But whenever I gain weight a little bit slower, I think that the distribution is a little bit different, and that's just purely observational.
Like a more even spread to it, you feel?
I do feel like that. I know some people might listen to this and think that that's not correct, but I've seen it in my
I
own
felt
prep.
this one, like, not to just for discussing, but I felt that this, like, last year or so, this is going to be probably the longest time I've had out between shows. And I found that like certainly body fat distribution, it would have been all held in my stomach and like lines that still like some condition through my glutes and stuff. Where this year and year and a half really much slower. It feels like it's kind of it looks better and it's very evenly spread. So like I don't know like from a scientific point, but like something that I've sort of noted in the last few of my check-ins is like this looks just a little bit more even. I look equally fat everywhere.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so like I've done the I went right, I'm gonna go all in, dirty bulk, and well, I wouldn't say dirty bulk, but a lot of the food wasn't great,
Yeah.
and but it was just calorically dense. It was probably 7,000 average per day across the week, and then at a weekend I was maybe going to 8 to 10 somewhere in there. Really, the game was so bad. It did affect actually how people just think if you eat more calories you feel stronger. I feel that you go beyond a point of no return almost, where you start to feel like the performance is impeded,
Yeah.
and whether that's in inflammatory processes, joint dysfunction, whether it's your central nervous system being overwhelmed by the acute increase in body weight, just having to cope with that whilst you're in off season, also trying to progressively overload all your big lifts. I felt like I was actually getting to a point where I was feeling very limited.
Yeah.
My breathing was more lethargic, sort of cardiovascular system having to cope with the extra demand of that mass definitely affected recovery between sets, my ability to magnify the intensities that I want to utilize as well. This year is probably the most opposing to that extreme, where I've sort of said my intention would be maximum 14, 15 pounds above stage weight this year. And, so far it's so good. I've been really patient with it. Partly with that was because I had the back dysfunction. It's like the last thing I need to do until I get this back rehabbed is to add another stone or 2 stone onto that frame, and particularly if that fat is localized too. So I just been really taking my time. I'm really enjoying my training. I feel hormonally my body's almost back to pre-comp normality again in terms of like sort of libido. I feel recovery's definitely improved. CNS adaptations, all those things I think are probably an absolute prime spot now for me to grow. And I was even in the gym the other day and I was training, and Edel says this is actually the biggest that you've looked in the off season. And I think it's just literally trying to retain. Like if I'm gaining a slower rate, then more of the percentage is potential muscle.
Yeah.
If you're gaining 10 pounds a week, even as a natural bodybuilder, you probably would need biopsy to see if you've actually added any muscle tissue out of that 10 pounds. So I just think like it's a little bit better. Plus, I want to be judged at the end of my off season, which was a post I put up a few weeks back saying, and I got a lot of people actually reaching out saying that they'd never thought like that before. And I said the reason why people find so much discipline in a prep phase is because at the end you're going to be harshly judged, both by your coach and more specifically the people at the opposing side of that table. So you tend to stick and be regimen and weigh out all your food. And if you're 201 grams instead of 200 grams of rice, you're going to take like a half a rice out and cut it in half or whatever. That level of adherence, people don't really go, oh, that's by eye, it's fine, it's close enough off season. So I said, perform your off season like at the end of your off season phase that you were going to be judged by your performance, by your adherence, and by your discipline. And that's something that's really stuck in my mind as I went through this initial phase. And I feel this is the best and healthiest from a psychological perspective that I have attached myself to an off season as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, would you expect when you come down from that to have gained, will you see a noticeable gain, say, in scale weight in pounds when you come down? Or is it very much like even say when you pushed your big heavier off season, like was there a net result of that where you went, oh, this is I can see a big difference here in terms of physique wise?
Yeah. I think like we'll put it this way, if you've got a little bit longer with less weight to drop, you're adjusting things on a very small scale. You're literally just tipping, oh, I'm going to decrease my calories very slightly. The percentage even of reduction, which just means like if we talk about like homeostasis and just the body's sort of harmonious environment, we want to just try to create this balance. So if I'm only like touching little things and moving them slightly week to week, I'm going to feel really good. Last year, my clients, Edel, my partner, didn't even know that I was wouldn't have like if they didn't know me, I wouldn't know you're in prep.
Yeah.
my productivity was higher. Even 3 weeks out, I decorated 3 rooms of my house while running a business and having quite a busy online coaching business at the same time, and felt absolutely fantastic because of this sort of micro adjustment throughout the whole phase of my prep. And I think that that's also going to advocate better retention of muscle mass.
Yeah.
You try and explain about natural bodybuilders. Us gaining too much fat is going to lead to just longer or extremely more acute deficit phases to get ready for the show again. And the byproduct of that is you're going to start sparing potentially lean muscle. So even if you put 50 pounds on in your off season, then you do luckily build. They say the average natural bodybuilder after 5 years of training will build 300 grams of muscle, 0.3 kilo in a year, right? That's off season. And that's obviously average. If you're training above average and your nutritional adherence above average, then you could probably say it's a little bit more than that. But so say even if you give yourself half a kilo, 500 grams of muscle, actual lean tissue per year, but you put 50 pounds on to get that 500 grams on, by the time you drop off that 50 pounds, you've more than likely lost it. And that's why I've seen some natural bodybuilders turn up every year and look the same or even slightly worse, because they haven't even reaccrued the muscle they've lost through their last prep. Never mind added the further 300 grams on top. So for me, my intention is clear. I want to be within striking range and just go through like phases where I'll actually have structural dietary breaks throughout my prep season next year, and be able to factor that into sort of busier periods of my work schedule. And I just think, like, from a psychological perspective, those definitely do work.
Yeah, I mean, I even with enhanced athletes, I prefer slightly like longer preps. I think it's a good way to go. I think psychologically, as you say, a lot of time it has less impact as well. And I see a better result at the back end of it rather than just very, very short. And then, especially as enhanced, it's so easy to just want to throw drugs at it as well.
Yeah.
And it's like like you said, actually, it seems to plaster over a lot of problems, which is like, we'll take more drugs. Well, we'll take more drugs. And obviously that has a very negative outcome in the back end of everything anyways. So like, I think like it's a good way to go with that sort of thought process, even around off seasons as enhanced athletes or natural athletes, is just a little bit slower. I think there's a time and a place for it, probably just to have the experience sometimes. I've seen at the start, at early days, I think you can get away with it. But I think the longer you get into it, then the more deleterious it is on you.
Yeah, I think that the sport, it seemed to be really short, aggressive preps were synonymous with assisted bodybuilding up until I don't know whether it's they've seen whether some of those, like even like yourself and maybe Matt McCulloch and different assisted bodybuilders who are prepping now natural athletes are actually sort of trying to work out what's the best, or the longer preps seem better. So a lot of the assisted bodybuilders have maybe started to go down that. I'm not saying that natural bodybuilders have led the way in that, but I think it's maybe opened the door for some assisted bodybuilders to go, maybe a longer prep is a better strategy overall.
Well, I think what natural bodybuilders, athletes have done anyways, is like that's where a lot of the research comes from for a lot of things. And I think it's then easy for enhanced guys to kind of poo-poo it as, natties are not hard, we're hardcore, but like I think for a lot of evidence-based research this came from, because you have to look at the minutiae, the 1%. And I really do feel that that's brought the sport forward as much as a lot of people don't like to admit it. To me, it's like, Eric Helms, 3DMJ, all that kind of stuff has brought the sport leaps and bounds forward, and at least made enhanced athletes and coaches think a little bit deeper.
Yeah, 100%. I think like last year there was, because I know like obviously I turned pro with the WNBF as well, World Natural Bodybuilding Federation, and like they had put a post up at the start of last year about they were going to ban any of their pros that holds a pro card with an untested federation, essentially. And the post is still there. You can go and read it, saying that if you do that, then you're not allowed to compete, essentially be banned, etc., etc. But I had reached out. I was advised, just don't bring it up and compete in both, and it'd be fine. Stay under the radar, you'd be grand. But part of the process was their belief, if their pros are competing in untested federations, that we are advocating drug use in bodybuilding, which I thought was just completely. I'm like, how do you come to that conclusion?
It's a flip of that, I think.
if anything. And then they were saying also natural bodybuilders are going and taking the pro cards in these other federations and essentially then being bottom feeders and getting smoked. And then they're having to come back with a tail between the legs. And that's something that I was like from my I can only talk for myself. My intention, as I said, was never the David versus Goliath. It was like I want to go and compete. I compete in P6. Like, there's no expectation, there's no pressure. And then because I went and competed there, how well the show was run, I was like, I loved that was my favorite show that I've ever competed in.
Mhm.
And the PCA have nailed it every single time. You know yourself just how well that they're run, how interactive they are. It makes your experience as an athlete. You feel like an athlete at one of those shows. It feels like a professional setup, and that was like why I want to continue to support the PCA on that level as well. So I just, I reached out to the WNBF and sort of said, look, my intention is, I'm at the back end of my career and I don't want to be sort of told what I can't and can't do. Bodybuilding isn't paying my mortgage. This isn't, as much as I might call it a career at times, it's not paying my bills. And even if I go to Germany and win a check, the check covers most of the travel to go to Germany. I'm coming
Yeah.
back with not spare change even, so it's, we're doing this because we love the sport. And I think like federations don't need, they shouldn't take it as a personal attack to the bodybuilders want to express themselves in different federations or enjoy different experiences. And, all our reasons for competing is completely different. It's unique. And that was my thing. I was like, if I'm going to compete maybe one or two more seasons, which is the reality, I just want to go out and bang, tick off a few boxes I would love to achieve and retire from the sport while I really enjoying it. And that's pretty much it.
What's going to make you retire from the sport, though, James? Like, what do you see the future plans within your bodybuilding are? Because obviously, I think again, I can always say on being natural. That wasn't really meant to be the complete theme of this podcast, but it's an interesting side of it. It's like at 44 and being natural. I'd imagine you're in a lot healthier spot than a lot of 44-year-old like competitive bodybuilders.
Yeah, I always said like I prep a lot of guys. I've got guys who are a good friend of mine, one of my UK athletes, who's turned 70. And he's won. If you go on, Dave Driscoll, you call him, and
I've seen him up
uh,
actually.
he's just he's a phenomenal guy. First of all, I actually met Dave in Miami competing with the BNBF team, and we became friends. And we go over and visit whenever we're in London. We meet up with him and his lovely wife and daughter and stuff. And Dave is last year we got him winning. He's won the world title. Masters over 60s. It was. It's just fantastic to see these people compete at that level. My head, though, I was always said I want to retire as an open bodybuilder. I don't want to be in a age category.
Yeah.
And I feel like I want to be as close to the absolute pinnacle of what I can achieve whenever I retire. So my thing to Edel was I've been honest about it, saying that as long as I'm improving, I would want to compete. If I feel like I'm doing all the right things and still not seeing the return, then for me it would be time to hang it up and focus on just prepping the athletes that we have and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So after this year with the injuries during the season, and it was really difficult. I was discussing that with you whenever we met up and stuff, and I had said, I think this is maybe the last year. If I can rehab the back, I'll go one more. So I think the 2026 will be potentially the last season. And there's a few things the cool things that I would love to just throw my hat. I just want to throw my hat in the ring and just see what happens, and then just
like. You're going to see it husky here. You don't want to put it out there. Put it out there. Come
I'm gonna keep that there. I know part of the thing was with the WNBF, for example, I want to do like just a global tour, pro tour,
on.
and if I can get sort of a little bit of backing, which and a little bit of help with it, I'd like to be able to travel and maybe hit like 9, 10 shows all around the world just on the pro circuit.
Yeah.
And obviously with the PCA, I honestly don't know. I don't think that winning a pro show is within my reach. I feel like I represented myself quite well this year. Top 3 at the British in a great lineup, top 5 in the worlds, which was a great lineup. But like I was as conditioned as I can be. So whenever I'm talking about refinement, my posing was not far off as good as it could be. There's still a few tweaks that I can make. And but I don't think the tweaks are enough to close the gap and allow me to, take out guys that are maybe 3, 4, 5 stone heavier. But
Yeah.
that would be an absolute, if it landed, obviously I would take it and just run off and finish. So, those are certainly a few of the things. And if any other opportunities open up, then I'll jump in as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool to hear that. I think there's sort of thing I could have you on because I don't want, I'm just worried of taking up your time and people's listening ability as well.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk a little bit more about the science of training because I know you do a lot and you talk a lot on that. It's something I'm very interested in as well, but maybe another time we can get you on.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to, I'm going to sort of end with this as well, is I want you to tell me, like, why do you love bodybuilding? Like, what is it about it? What does it do for you that kind of gets you flowing?
I think my answer in that as a competitive, because even if people aren't competing, you're still a bodybuilder. If you're going into the gym and building muscle tissue and you try and explain that to people that are coming into the gym, I want to build some muscle, but I don't want to be a bodybuilder. And it's like, there's a difference between a competitive bodybuilder and somebody that's just actively participating in all the gym elements and maybe adhering to some nutritional profile. That's essentially still a bodybuilder. For me, what the sport gives me is just like a real clear end product of that phase, and it's always something. I think the best bodybuilders tend to be ones who take the critique on, and you almost crave that. Like if you come off a stage and everything's positive, the ego in your mind loves to hear it, but the person that wants to better themselves is like going, if I just placed third and you're telling me everything was perfect, like where do I go? I think like having the ability to be humbled is probably one of the beauties of the sport, and understanding that regardless of how much work that you put in, there is potentially somebody on that day going to be better. And I see people too often sort of spit the dummy out, and it's okay to be hurt. I've been hurt by decisions, but I still believe in sort of walking off and not ruining somebody else's experience just because your ego's got a little bit hurt. So I think the humbling thing is what I find very addictive. And the second then is the connections, even meeting the likes of yourself as well. The amount of amazing people that I would consider some of my best friends, and I would never have crossed paths without the sport of bodybuilding. And particularly the good people in this sport, we've got just so much in common. Like our personalities can be very, very similar. It's the ability to just eat the same foods over and over again, rinse and repeat, and being content within that space. I think that it just gives that if, as soon as me and you start speaking, that we're going to be able to talk for an hour. It's not going to be, I've got awkward silences. There's so much. And then finally, the thought of winning, and it's not winning, it is the thought of winning is always so much better. And anybody that's won enough sort of competitions probably have experienced this as well. Whenever you're in the gym and you're about to do a set and you're taking your deep breaths and getting your CNS fired up, you're ready to go, and you get into your head, it's like, right, this is for the win, this is for the win. And you go in and you get this massive rush, and the feeling that you get is just insane. Adrenaline kicks off, you smash that set, you feel accomplished, you walk off. All those moments feel so much better than any win that I've ever had. The win happens, and because I'll have 1,000 of those experiences through prep every time I go into the gym to train, and I'll walk on stage, and you're nervous at the back of the stage, waiting for your number to be called, and it's called. And as soon as you get the photos taken and walk off stage, and you get 3 or 4 people congratulating you, you're already thinking about what's next. So it's not the win; it's the thought of the win that I love.
Classmate, love that. Every time I want to go and smash the gym here now straight away. No, James, honestly, that was cracker. Like, I definitely have to get you back on again. Is there anywhere, like, where can people find you? Also, I think it'd be good to maybe give your seminar a shout out as well.
Yeah, I just Instagram, James_W_Melville, or you can message the compound room page, which is my gym, mine and Adele's gym in Lisburn. So you can message the page either there through Instagram or via Facebook or Messenger. So those would probably be the best way. My email address is also on the Instagram account, is if people want to connect that way as well. And yes, I deliver science-based seminars, which has been something that I used to do prior to the gym opening back before 2016. Once we opened the gym, then I had to put that in the back burner. Just simply, we didn't have the time. We've built the gym to a good position. We've got a great crew that are running it whenever I'm not there. which it gives me enough opportunity then to sort of spread my wings. So this year we'll get back into delivering science-based content. I've been going out doing sort of CBD with some gyms, for another one next month in Dublin, at one in Belfast. And then I've been running seminars in the Compound Room Lisburn. So these are open to both members and externals. So anybody that's interested in coming. Generally, so the next one's going to be on the 12th of April. So if you're interested in coming to it, it's literally about an hour and 25, and it'll be theoretical based. So it'll be in front of the overhead projector, and then the final component of it will be the practical elements on the workshops. So it'll be like talking about internal, external cueing, fiber orientation, how to get more out of pretty much all your exercises. And yeah, it was highly successful. There's still a few spaces left for the next one. The last one had sold out, and that's pretty much it.
Right. And I think the more stuff of that you can get to, the better, and really kind of, push it all forward and push your own education as well. But as I say, mate, generally, very much thank you for coming on. Guys, thank you for listening. Please watch, subscribe, share as well, because I think the more people can get behind this and the more we can get more people on, athletes on, even show reviews for PCA, that's another thing we're going to got coming on. So maybe get a couple of guys that maybe like yourself, James, to maybe go back and over some of the shows, because I really want to push this Irish bodybuilding scene and get it moving forward. Obviously, find me Rennie coaching. And thanks for watching and listening, guys.